Still ready for the last panel of the day. We are talking about ocean observing gaps, next steps for an integrated and sustained ocean observing system in Europe. The keynote will be about the marine observing networks in Europe, current state, gaps, opportunity, and the way forward. Held by the head of the observing unit of Poseidon operational system, member of the EOOS steering group, former vice chair and chair of the executive board director of EuroOOS, and Greek delegate at the GPI Oceans Management Board and the regional team leader of the Greek EMSO node. Please welcome the research director, Institute of Oceanography, Hellenic Center for Marine Research in Greece, George Petihakis.
Hello, I know it's a difficult time. It's the last panel, but bear with us because we think that it's an important subject. We've been discussing anyway about observations all this morning. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I will try to show you what we have done, or a bit of what we have done in EuroSea project. And these slides have been compiled by myself, Johannes, and Abed, who are sitting here. But also there is a huge group behind them, since these work packages that they deal with the issue of networks, observing networks, was one of the biggest in EuroSea. So, but before getting into the EuroSea work, I think it's helpful if I show a couple of slides of where we are today in Europe. The present state. And we know that we're performing observations with multiple platforms, many different observing platforms, which have a lot of challenges, but at the same time we have the advantage of elasticity or plasticity in our system. And, oops, no, wrong button, okay. Now, how is the system structured? We've got a big pillar at the national level, which has quite a lot of problems because we've got a lot of different actors there operating, performing observations, but at the same time, if we see very closely, we will see a lot of inefficiencies. A little coordination, sometimes no coordination at all, wasting of resources, duplication of efforts, and so on. Further up, we've got the regional level, and this is a level which is associated with the challenges that we face in the marine system. So we see there the commissions, the regional conventions, we see the RUSES, the EuroGOOS RUSES. These are the regional ocean observing system of EuroGOOS. We see some projects, regional projects. And then one level up, we see European level, where we've got the various directives, we've got policies, we've got strategies, we've got organizations like the Marine Board, we've got the EuroGOOS, we've got the research infrastructures, which I have another slide for them, and we've got the infrastructural projects, but also the projects that they look into observations like EuroSea. Now, if one would like to see, to focus onto the problems, we see that it's a complex picture, it's a complex landscape, which promotes competition, fragmentation. We see a waste of resources, as I said. We see capacity imbalance, especially north to south, east to west in Europe. And we see overlaps and complexity. In terms of gaps, one could see today, and this is nothing new, we have spatial gaps in terms of horizontal and temporal and vertical resolution. We've got temporal gaps. We've got gaps in technology. Some parameters are missing or are undersummed, like biology. We've got gaps in the availability of the data that is produced. We've got gaps in governance, on sustainability, and on the readiness of our networks. And actually, in this short talk, I'm going to focus on these three ones. And let's see what happens in terms of governance. You have heard, you know about GOOS, and in Europe, we've got one GRA, which is the EuroGOOS. There is MONGOOS as well, but let's focus on EuroGOOS. And EuroGOOS is structured around these regional challenges that I said. So we've got the 5 regional systems, which they look into a specific region. We've got the cross-cutting working groups, which they deal with specific issues. They come and go according to the needs, to the challenges. And we've got the task teams. The task teams, we are actually focusing on specific technology. So you can see that there's a task team on tide gauges, on Argos, and so on. And actually, this is what we picked in EuroSea to work on, as I will be showing later on. An important component in Europe is the research infrastructures. And research infrastructures have the potential to unite single observing efforts in each country. So they've got the potential, but in reality, we see that in many cases, there is very little participation. So this potential is not actually fully explored. And we've got the ERICs, which are the legal structures, but we also have some programs which are on the way, let's say, or the ISBLs, to become an ISBL or an ERIC. Now, an important characteristic about research infrastructure is that they contribute to what we say global efforts. They are connected with what's happening outside Europe. And I think this is a very key characteristic. And again, this is something that we need to explore as Europe. Now, I said that there are problems at the national level where there are many inefficiencies, but thankfully, and I take the example of my country, Greece, in the last few years, we try to bring integration at this important level. We try to unite, to bring a common umbrella, under a common umbrella, all the different actors. And the same is happening in France, as we saw this morning. The same is happening in Italy. Rosalia told us about it. And we think that if we are successful in this, we will achieve integration. So we will have central design, we will have a common strategy, one voice to speak, and maximize the resources. But also we will have harmonization. Harmonization on priority setting, so we will set up priorities, and when we have available funds, we will know where these funds should go. We'll exchange of knowledge, so we will not only collaborate in the framework of European projects, but we will collaborate inside our own countries. Exchange of technology will be possible. If you are missing something, the guy next door can give it to you, and of course, we will work with common best practices. Now, one of the gaps that I highlighted is the sustainability, and this is a table that I have taken from a study that was done in the framework of Copernicus. This was actually done from EuroOOS, and it goes back to 2019, so it's not up to date. But I think it's indicative that only 28% of our observing system has some sort of sustainability. Sustainability which goes above 10 years. So in reality, our observing system runs on very short time projects. And you know that you cannot design, you cannot make strategy if something is funded on a 3-year basis. That's a big disadvantage that we have. And from a work that we did in the Marine Board, a science brief on the sustainability of the observing system, we saw that the observing system is funded through, there is diverse purposes with different mandates. And some mandates that fund the observing system are more sustainable than others. So if we see that ocean policies, public health, blue economy seems to have a better sustainability than operational services and science, which are based more on projects. So now what we did in EuroSea. In EuroSea, we have these 8 groups, 8 networks, which, as I said, we took the EuroOOS task teams. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We wanted to give fuel, as we say, to something that's already running. And we wanted to see how good they are on this framework of readiness level. And especially, we would say that we would be happy if we would manage to show that we are at level 7 or higher. And we assessed the networks before when we started. We wanted to see where they are, where they have problems. So these problems could be solved through EuroSea. And then we did another assessment at the end of the project on all these areas that you can see here, like internal organization, network performance, visibility of the network, and so on. And this is the scoring. This is the actual scoring, which was quite good at the end of the project. This was not the situation before the project, so EuroSea actually contributed significantly to all networks and helped them to advance on the readiness level. However, of course, through this examining, this assessment, we saw gaps. We saw gaps in inclusivity in some networks, how representative they are. We saw gaps in adapting and sharing best practices, on data and metadata visibility, integration between them with cross-cutting activities, to go from a self-organized network into a truly operational one. And also something we saw that it's missing is a regular assessment with the use of KPIs. Something else that was also done, that was all WP3, in the framework of WP1, Abed went one step further and he looked on gaps for observing and forecasting phenomena. And this is a list of looking into, you can see here, various gaps on phenomena, but also on value chain. And it's interesting to see that from this literature review that he examined many different papers, and he came up with 27 gaps. What was coming very, very often were the ones that were highlighted. Gaps in the observing networks, gaps in data availability, and these gaps are the ones which are hampering, actually, which are putting obstacles in the performance of the forecasting, of the observing and forecasting system. And that was one part of Abed's work, but the next one was actually to go and assess how ready is the European Ocean observing and forecasting system, so not only observing but also forecasting, to observe and forecast a series of phenomena, and again using the framework of readiness. And you can see here that only 3 phenomena out, I don't remember what the total number is, are at 7, where 67% of the phenomena examined fall in the category of 2 to category which is level 2 is documentation, to category 4, which is the trial, which is pretty low. Of course, Abed, possibly you have received one of Abed's questionnaire, an Excel file, which asks us to validate this, and it's something I think which will be extremely helpful if you actually take some time to do it. So, what are really the opportunities and recommendations that we have after all this analysis? We think that we should build on what is already existing. We don't want to do more new things, which is like EuroGoose and the research infrastructures. Something that was mentioned today in several talks, but also from Zoe, and I was really happy to hear about that, is that time we need to quantify the benefits. It's time to show how important are ocean observations for the society. Of course, to design our system around user requirements, to exploit all possible funding sources, to integrate all observing efforts, MSFD, operational. We don't have the luxury that each of us has its own observing budget. We have to see what we can get together. To have some sort of tracking of performance and assessment, to exploit technological advancement. Digital Ocean is already, we saw this morning about Digital Ocean, and of course, to work towards coordination at the national level, but also at the European, and there we have EOOS. And EOOS is started back in 2010, for those that are not familiar. It came as an idea from EuroGoose and the Marine Board. It was in the EuroSea Declaration in 2010, and at that time, it was highlighted as one of the 3 key areas, 3 priorities for the next decade, which means 2020. Now we're 2023, and still EOOS is not fully implemented. The vision of EOOS is a European ocean observing system that is sustained and meets the specific needs of users. And now we've got the new EOOS strategy and new implementation plan. And if you look at the implementation plan, you will see very nice activities there. But what is the real problem? Is that we are trying to actually fulfill implementation plan through projects. like EuroSea. EuroSea helped immensely EOS. But you can understand that if you have such high expectations to set up a European ocean observing system, it's not possible to do it with projects. You need something bigger. You need something more substantial in place. And the next piece of cake that we have is AMRIT, and this is what I will close with. And AMRIT is trying to integrate, you've heard about this earlier this morning, is trying to integrate the level of research infrastructures and actually to contribute towards EOS on a very, very important aspect, which is to help operators, from one hand, to give some coordination to the operators, but also to create a federation as a single entry point for the national operators. So an OceanOps system for Europe. And I think, yeah, I'm a little bit over time, so okay, thank you very much.
George Petihakis, thank you very much. And we're going to have the panelists for the last round on stage. He joined the Healthy Ocean and Seas unit of the Directorate-General Research and Innovation to develop and implement research and innovation policy on ocean observation, fair data and ocean knowledge on the Horizon Europe, the European Research Framework Programme. He co-leads the EU Digital Twin Ocean Initiative. He is the European Commission's focal point for the G7 Working Group, Future of the Seas and Ocean Initiative, and contributes to the development of the All-Atlantic Ocean Research and Innovation Alliance. He's here now already. Please welcome the Policy Officer at the European Commission, Nicolas Segebarth. The next speaker is the Scientific Director of Mercator Ocean International, MOI. His role is to ensure the scientific quality and prepare future evolutions of the ocean information offer of MOI and of the programs managed by MOI for the European Commissions like Copernicus Marine or Digital Twin Ocean. His areas of expertise include in situ and satellite ocean observing systems, ocean prediction and operational oceanography. He is or was member of several international scientific committees dealing with satellite observations, in situ observations and ocean prediction systems. Hello and welcome on the panel, Pierre-Yves Traon. And now we will fill the panel with two women. And by the way, in EuroSea, 11 out of 7 world package leaders are female, just to point this at one point. Our guest is in the panel is looking into the future. She is involved in designing multi-decadal ocean, climate reanalysis, and coupled forecasts of the Earth system from days to years ahead. She is steering coordinated experiments for the evaluation of the ocean observing system for seasonal to interannual forecasts as part of the flagship SynOps project contributing to the Ocean Decade. Please welcome the head of the Earth System Predictability section at the European Centre for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, Magdalena Balmaseda. And last but not least, she's serving as the Secretary-General of EuroGOOS and chairing the EOOS steering group. Her main activities are related to facilitating collaboration in ocean observing at national, regional and European scales and promoting interoperability, fair data principles and sustainability of ocean observations. And there she is, from Estonia but working in Brussels. Please welcome Inga. Wow, now it's getting tricky with the words here at this time of the day. We heard a lot about gaps. You mentioned a lot of gaps already. We also heard a lot of what EuroSea already achieved. But I'd like to address the first question to Magdalena. You're working with forecast models, and you also found out that there's still data missing. So what's missing actually for your work? What would you point?
Maybe before going into the deficiencies, it's good to reflect on the success stories. So now probably most of you check the weather applications, whether to bring a raincoat or not. So those weather forecasts have seen the ocean observations that they had been deployed, and they are transmitted in real time and assimilated. Perhaps they contributed very little to the weather in Paris this time, but they are contributing to intensity of the tropical cyclones around the globe. They are contributing to the forecast of what is going to happen 3 weeks ahead or 6 months ahead. So we predicted quite well successfully. We expect, all of us expect El Niño happening this year. The ocean observations have been instrumental. Whether the sea ice will retreat more or less over the Arctic, ocean observations are important. So, and it's not only atmospheric variables and weather, but this forecast also produce information about the state of the ocean, or the forecast of the ocean. They can predict marine heat waves, for instance, and a success story of EuroSea has been influencing the climate services, Copernicus climate services, to put open the seasonal forecast of these ocean variables, which now, where is the gap? The major gap by far is linking these forecasts that are global with the ocean practitioners. And this is both an observation gap, because we need downscaling and transforming this information into something that is sectoral information, and there is also an outreach gap. So that's regarding, if you want, the overall picture, but there are gaps in observations. There are gaps in salinity. We need surface salinity. And we need sea ice thickness. We need Arctic snow over the sea ice. We would like to have better measure of the diurnal cycle over the ocean and the mixed layer, these interface observations. And last but not least, it's very important to have this long time series for validation of whatever we do. And that implies transport, that many of these efforts are sustained on a research basis rather than operational, and currents. So long time series, transports and currents, those are gaps. Yeah.
Thank you so far. We are going to space. Pierre-Yves, you combine satellite and in situ data, but what would you need to better assimilate this data to the models?
Okay, thank you. So just to remind, so Mercator Ocean International is an ocean prediction center. So we are in a task by European Commission to implement and run the Copernicus Marine Service. Copernicus Marine Service is an European Union integrated ocean monitoring and forecasting service with a large base of user on service, many applications and so on. I mean, the key aspect of the service, so it's global and regional, it's really an integrated system. So we are using satellite observation from the Copernicus program and other satellite from at international level, in situ observation on models. We have a strong dependency on the observing system for the systems that we run. It's very important to remind this complementarity between satellites. So satellites are unique. I mean, we are really on its an incredible success in Europe to have developed these satellite observing systems through Copernicus. But we need in situ data to observe the ocean interior, to validate satellite observation. So what we do today at Mercator and Copernicus Marine, we ingest all these satellite observations plus all in situ data, all the ones that were presented by George, so Argo, moorings, drifters, in our models to describe and forecast in real time the ocean and serve many applications. But we do have gaps for the in situ observing system. So as explained by Magdalena, so we have gap for the polar regions. Arctic is really is critical, and we lack observation for the ocean and for sea ice. We have gaps for the deep ocean because there are many important aspects of the deep ocean that are not monitored. And we have large gap for biology, biogeochemistry, because this is really very few data available. And that's this really is an important gap that prevents to develop important services, I mean, for the society. So what I think what is really needed, and I think EuroSea was very instrumental to develop and to realize this and to come with the agreement and so on, is to structure this European Ocean Observing System, which really will to consolidate and improve what European member states are doing for observation together with the European Commission. In a similar way to what we have for satellite observation. Satellite observation today, of course, we can always improve on, but with thanks to European Commission, ESA, EUMETSAT, we really have a very good system in place with evolution for the next 20 years. And we need really to make sure that we consolidate in parallel the institute, because we really need the two, and they are quite complementary. Yeah,
yeah, what we had already said, I don't know who said it during the day, but we achieved a lot already, and we need to build on what we have. And Inga, maybe this leads to you. So what happens next? How to organize better in the future, or organize at all to use what we have already?
Okay, thanks. I think, first of all, I would like to stress that EOOS framework that we built starting in 2010, it was a bottom-up achievement of the whole community, which I would like to highlight is a great achievement, because if something is initiated from the bottom and not the top, that means people are caring what they are doing, and they are putting more effort on implementation and achieving the goals. But it cannot stay like that if we are talking about the European-wide ocean observing system forever. It cannot rely only on voluntary contributions and on short-term projects in coordinating the different efforts. So I think that we really need to make a next step now to move from the voluntary efforts and voluntary work towards more structured and supported coordination at the European Ocean Observing. And for this, I liked very much this morning, there were many people who emphasized the need to prioritize our activities. Because if we think what we need, the wish list is too long. We need a lot, and we all have different needs. But we need to prioritize at different levels on the data, on the tools and services that are needed. So at the national level, but most importantly also at the European level. So it's nations who should look beyond their own priorities to see how they can contribute also to the European priorities. But if we talk about priorities, we can talk about the priorities, we can list them down, but if those do not lead to the commitments at the national, regional and European level, then it doesn't help us. So we really need to reach from the priorities to the very clear commitments.
Actually, George, maybe this is the point you said, the national level of challenges. You also pointed out some in your keynote. And you'd also say this is probably not the priority to work on. So how would you go on with this?
Yes, I think that the national level has particular problems, and I think that if we invest relatively little effort on this, we will have a very high impact at the European scale, because we know that the actors, we now know we have the mechanism through all this experience with EuroGOOS and the various coordination framework, and it's a matter of bringing those down at the national. So if we manage to work at the national level, so we speak with one voice, we know when we design our system, it's a common design. When there are resources available, we know where they should go, where the priorities are. We will have a huge impact overall, which will be reflected also at the European level. And I keep it short because I took more time with my presentation.
Nicolas, we already spoke about how impressive it actually is to see all the experts gathered here today. And I'm actually interested how you feel about listening to all of the keynotes, all of the speeches today, and how the presentation and the final results of EuroGOOS feel for you. I mean, it's been a 12.3 million investment. So what are you feeling about the day after the final presentations?
Well, my first reaction was say that my mind is blown by the amount of information that I receive, but that is part of my job, that I follow project from a certain distance, and then I receive a huge amount of information that I need to distill. But what I wanted to say, beyond the fact that being the last intervention makes it extra difficult for me, because everybody before me already said the things that I would have liked to say, and they said it in a much better way because they are experts and I'm not. So if you are all working on ocean observation in situ, it would be kind of fair to say that I'm looking at it from outer space. But maybe before I go to your question, say why it is so important for me and for the job that, or the function that I am currently carrying. So as you said, I'm working in DG Research and Innovation in the Health, Sea and Ocean unit. So the unit which is responsible for the scientific policy and program on marine issues. So covering observation, biodiversity, ecosystem, I mean the whole range except the renewables and the shipping and things like that. And my particular job is to work on the digital knowledge system, which is one of the main enablers of the mission Restore Our Ocean and Seas by 2030. The EU missions is a new type of instrument which has been launched under Horizon Europe, which aims at tackling the greatest societal challenges that we are facing. And the ocean is one of these greatest challenges. There is 3 objectives that we would like to attain. One is to restore and protect the biodiversity and the ecosystems. The second one is to prevent and remediate marine pollution. And the third one is to make the blue economy circular and carbon neutral. And the digital ocean knowledge system is there to support reaching these objectives. So of course, it's not only with our program that we will be able to reach. We hope that these are the seeds for additional actions by all the member states, by the region, by our international players. And as I said, my specific task is to develop that ocean digital system, of which the digital twin of the ocean is a main deliverable. So what is that famous digital twin of the ocean, which is getting to hear about more and more, but it still may be a bit fuzzy in the mind of the people. So what we are trying to do with the digital twin of the ocean is to make the knowledge about the ocean available and actionable to the end user, so to the people who are directly and daily working at sea or with the coastal communities, operating there because they have businesses, etc. And to do something like that, of course, require the appropriate ocean observing and forecasting system. As fancy and sexy and challenging as it can be, the digital twin of the ocean is the ultimate layer of a very, very complex system, which needs to be efficient. And so projects like EuroSea and all the principle of having a European ocean observing system, which is efficient, which is fit for purpose, is essential to me. And so, of course, I'm very glad to see the efforts that have been undertaken in EuroSea and in many other projects, because they do contribute to the integration of what the ocean observing system is currently. And you have shown it. For me, it is really complex to apprehend. It's not a system which is controlled from a top-down approach. It's a collection, it's a multitude of little networks, groups, scientific activities that are working in very different domains and asking different needs. So when we talk about an integrated and sustainable ocean observing systems, I say, Jesus, what do we need to do next? And EuroSea, for instance, has been very good at starting on the integration of it. Where I think we still to work much more, and I'm thinking about the next steps, is about the sustainability issue, because it is a problem. Yeah. The system as it is today is the result of action funded by very different ministries, from the research, from the ministries of industries, ministries of the sea or agriculture sometime. I mean, it's a lot of different responsibilities which have different purposes. And we need to be able to apprehend the system in its globality. And I'm not sure we are there yet, and I think there's a long road to be there. And in particular, we need to be able to evaluate the performance of the different components of the system, but of the system in its totality, in its globality. And how do we do that? I don't have the answers, and I think there's a lot of research to be able to do so. But this will help us, funders, program managers from the different countries, to identify the priorities, because when we talk about sustained ocean observing, it's not about taking the snapshot today and say, okay, we need to keep flooding with the money. We need to be very smart about it, because the resources are not infinite. So we need to be able to make priorities. But today, I am incapable of doing so, because I don't know what are the networks which answer the actual needs. So it is very important for me to be able to assess the performance from the perspective of the needs. And that will tell what are the most important networks, what they are missing critically, where we have redundancies. We may have redundancies, I don't know, where we actually have gaps, and which level needs to intervene. Is it the international level that needs to intervene? Of course, there are some global efforts where we need cooperation. Sometimes it's regional, sometimes it's local, sometimes it's the industry, etc. So that's it for now.
So kind of hands on the table, there can be, will be future investments. You only need to know how it could work. I think everybody would like to hear a good answer on that.
Of course, there will be investments. And one of them you heard about already, and that's the Sustainable Blue Economy Partnership, which is also a new type of instrument in the research program of the European Commission. And these partnerships, and there are many, they have a very pivotal role in structuring and constructing communities around an objective. And here's the blue economy, but it covers different domains of the blue economy. And as we said, the ocean observing supports all of them. There's not a single sector which is not supported by ocean observing. So we need to make sure that we have a body which helps developing and implementing the European ocean observing system. So I think the sustainable blue economy has a real role to play. And then, of course, we have a number of projects and activities in the pipeline. The research infrastructure are very useful to structuring the communities. You heard about AMRIT. There are a few others in the preparation in aquaculture and fisheries and on transnational access to research infrastructure in general, called Aquarius, that will be also coming in the next months. We work very hard on making sure that we have that co-design approach that we heard many times over the last 2 days. It is essential to be able to engage different actors of the knowledge value chain and make sure that the information or the knowledge reaches those final users. So lots of things coming.
Inga, that sounds good, doesn't it?
It's not sufficient, and you will say that because I agreed with what you said. It needs commitment from the funders to be able to have the sufficient resources to coordinate and implement the system. So I fully supported your statement there.
Yeah, I'm not opposing in anything. I would just like to catch up what you said. I think that priorities are defining our needs, because if we have priorities, then we can see what we need to fulfill those priorities. And our needs, to fulfill our needs, then we need to know what capacities we have. So these are like you have to take it one step by another. So there is really a need to understand where the gaps are. We can say that we need data here, more, and there, but at the same time, if the priorities are not defined and the different services and data needs are not defined, then it's also difficult to identify the gaps. So, but to identify the gaps, I think we really need to be able to assess what we have, what are the performances, like you mentioned, but not only in a sense that we count how many gliders or profiling buoys different nations have, but we have to be able to assess how many of those assets are in the water and providing data, in which regions they are providing those data. Then we can see where the gaps are. And now there is a step change in the political level that needs to be made. And this is, we need to have a political will to change the way we plan our observations and we make our observing programs, because those are very often only fulfilling national priorities or European requirements for different policies. But if we set different priorities also for the clear priorities for the different tools and services at the European level, I think that the nations need to also contribute to those. So it is a political will that we need at much higher level than we have had so far, working from bottom up.
Having a discussion on stage, which I think is the purpose of a panel, right?
Exactly.
So I think what is really essential is to be impact-driven when you measure the performance of a system. And so it's not about the number of gliders or whether there's a gap in a certain value, because everybody from its own networks will say, yeah, there I have a dramatic gap. But the problem is, what happens if that gap is not filled for the final users? What does it mean for people working in aquaculture and who are terrified by marine heat waves? Well, I mean, what will prevent them from reacting in time to a marine heat wave if they don't have the right measurements and forecasting? And I think this is the angle that needs to be taken to be able to demonstrate the value of ocean observing. We can do a lot of economic analysis and have billions of numbers, but if you are very concrete into the impacts on the businesses, on the communities, on the people who work on the coastal zones, I think we can demonstrate the value of it and identify where we need to act on the system itself.
Pierre-Yves, was this a reaction to say something?
Just want to add something on the impact. I mean, we know the impact, at least for some application services. I mean, we know the gaps. I mean, today, I mean, all in-situ observing systems that are used, let's say operationally in a ocean forecasting center, I mean, they have an impact. If you remove one of them, I mean, there is a degradation. I mean, the ocean is very large. It's huge. And you might have the impression when you see a map with all observations that is really filled with measurement. But no, it's not true. We are dealing with very fine-scale measurement, fine-scale. So you need really to have much better observation, and this is a quantify. Of course, but there are also new needs that will come, in particular to monitor biology and so on. So this is really part of, and that's something that we do at Mercator as an ocean prediction center. So we work with the ocean observing community very closely, by the way, as part of Copernicus with EuroOOS to review the status of the observing system, the impact assessment, and how this given observation impacts the analysis and forecast that we provide operationally to many users, and how they are dependent on those. And just to give you maybe one simple example, I mean, in Copernicus Marine, we have had in the past our colleague in the Mediterranean Sea working with a very state-of-the-art ocean modeling for biogeochemistry, and they were simulating BGC, so Argo float with a BGC sensor, which was really one of the, I think it was one of the only one in the world, I mean, doing this real-time assimilation of BGC Argo. But all these observations, they were developed as part of a research project in Italy, France, and so on. So they stopped. And as a result, I mean, they don't assimilate anymore because you only have one or two floats for this. So this is a degradation of the service that is provided for the different policy and different needs. So I think we really critically need to consolidate on those gaps. I mean, there are different gaps. That was explained by George. We have sustainability gap just to maintain what we have today, but we also have new needs. I mean, I was 2 days ago in a big conference in Toulouse dealing with a new satellite observing system, SWOT, which will be revolutionize the way we can observe the ocean at small scale. Many oceanographers there, they realize that to understand where the Gulf Stream, how the Gulf Stream will move, will evolve, you need to observe at very fine scale. You know, we are discussing here a resolution of 1 kilometer or less. So this means there are a lot to be done to really much better improve, observe the ocean for real applications. But it's our role to work together to communicate on those needs, to also document these needs and to make the advocacy together.
Communicate together. This is my keyword to give the chance to ask questions from the audience. Toste.
So thank you. So we heard from many speakers here the need of prioritize and put priorities. That's obvious in a world of limited resources, but at the same time, we have multiple end users with multiple needs, and both from science and from industry and agencies and nations. So this is a question to all of you. How to do that process of priority in a fair way that we actually do the right priorities, and how can we then possibly refine that and adjust those priorities? So what is the first step? Personally, I like to be pragmatic. It's better to make one set of priorities and then go back in a few years and see if that was right. But what is the right way or the best way maybe to try to find priorities?
Who wants to go first? Inga.
Yeah, there are never right answers, but just a thought that I think first of all we need to identify the priorities of different sectors. So it's not just the priorities of the governments, and it's not just the priorities of the Commission. It's the priorities of the private sector, which was also mentioned in the previous panel. And I think this is kind of really a series of different dialogues together with solution-finding discussions. So it's not like that we try to define something that we need, but we also need to work together towards how we will achieve it. And we don't need to work alone. There is a huge community in different sectors who can support us. And I think we need to take that chance.
Magdalena.
Yeah. When we hear about the in-situ observations, I think asking about priorities is almost when you go to the supermarket and say, should I buy milk or bread? It's not buying chocolate or a sweet. It's something, the only limit is the capacity of your fridge, basically, whether we are, as a community, we are organized enough to uptake all these needs and in a coordinated manner. I think that's the limit. Well, and the funding, of course, but the funding should not be a limit for the in-situ observations, especially for sectoral applications on the ocean, which is clearly underfunded. And the communities or the practitioners are not able to exploit all the information that is provided, and it exists. So we are running short. We really need to make this connection. How to start? I don't know. One possibility, I mean, maybe it's for the digital twin of the ocean, or especially if you are going to have virtual realities, if we are going to have virtual realities of this world, is which observations do you need to make sure that your virtual reality connects with the physical reality for a given application? If we are able to do that, then we will close the loop. In the meantime, we are going to have only virtual realities.
Can I just?
Yeah.
I think it's, of course, a crucial question. It can be addressed differently when we discuss the global, the regional, or the coastal, because there are different actors, different stakeholders, and so on. But it must be based at the end on an impact of observing system for applications, can be vigorous, but also maturity and feasibility, because that's other elements that are ongoing through pilot phase and so on. This is really much in the spirit of GOOS and but I think it's part of the activities the community should do. I mean, and we have all this Oceanops conference. I mean, there's been discussion on the priority, what the community wants. And we have tools. You mentioned Digital Twin Ocean, all this activity on observing system simulation experiment that we can run to really assess the value of the different networks and so on, that exists. But I would say that, I mean, it's a bit different from what you have for the coastal and the global regional. But
Okay, maybe we find out this. There was another question.
Yes, a question and a comment. So Jean Monnet, one of Europe's father, was selling cognac as a young man, so relying on maritime transport. And he discovered that he was losing money at that time because the transport was not optimized at all. So he asked the Prime Minister to create a Franco-British, at that time, axis to solve this complicated problem, but it was not a complex problem. So then after he did the same with the Steel and Coal organization, he became the first president of that for boosting the political construction of Europe. So we are solving easily complicated problem to address complex problem. So it's exactly what Nicolas was saying. If we try to address the whole complexity of the problem, we won't make it. So the idea is to address complicated problem, coordinating the operators in Europe, and then having, based on this, the capacity to solve a complex problem. And it's exactly in some way what the engineers of Mercator, Ocean, and their colleagues in Europe have been doing. They have been solving a complex problem, numerical solution of the ocean, data simulation, etc. They did it in 10 years, more or less, to solve complex problems, user needs of the global ocean, etc. So why not to do the same for the observation? Solve a complicated problem, AMRIT, and there are other problems for sure to solve, and then address the more complexity we have been discussing today and the other day. So maybe as an engineer and a scientist as well, I would decouple the complexity and the complicated coordination problem, which is a technical one. That's my comment. And a question to Pierre-Yves, it's about the gap in the polar ocean. So I see here a risk because the polar observing system is developing by itself with Interos and a lot of other projects where they have an integrated vision of the Arctic with the ocean, the atmosphere, and the land. And maybe here there is a gap that is being created by the framework program because of their funding scheme that we have to look at. And it's essentially an ocean, the Arctic, and there are still some technical issues. This is to answer Ed's comment about the technical feasibility. Here we have still some technical difficulties before we are able to really observe the ocean, in particular under the ice. So that's a question and a comment, and I think the observing is still something difficult, and if you can comment, I would be happy. Thank you.
Well, not comment.
Very last comment. Amrit is the ambrosia of the Hindu god, but it's not honey. It's made of hallucinogen plants, so maybe what I told is completely crazy, so forget it.
No, it's not crazy at all. Just maybe go back on the polar. I mean, this is a gap which is well identified. I mean, there are many actions at the European Commission level with, there is the Arctic Passion project, so very large project dealing with the Arctic Ocean, with developing, improving the observation, but we have a key issue on the sustainability. In parallel, there are major efforts as part of Copernicus with ESA, and Craig mentioned this, with a new satellite mission to observe the polar region. So we'll have the SEAMER, a microwave satellite, Crystal, Rosal, several. So there are already capabilities that will be developed that exist today to monitor from space that will continue in the next 20 years with improved capabilities. And again, we need to make sure that the institute develop in a parallel way. Otherwise, and this is indeed much more challenging technically, in this region. So it's really, yeah. So I agree with you, by the way.
Any more questions? Johannes.
Yes, thank you. I think retrospectively we heard a lot about impact, about values, I think it was very theoretical, so to say. There were a lot of, for example, the EuroSea experiment, and we do design studies and so forth. I wonder, are there examples for really user feedback in terms of something is really now not working? Something is really, a user really comes back and saying, And I don't mean a scientific user that says, well, where's my satellite map? I really mean a user that sees as at risk an income or a profit or yeah, something like that. Really an application case where we already now can show, or maybe several application cases where we can show the real value of the ocean observing, in particular on the whole, I think, a global system. We heard, I think, from Anders, very, very small scale port things, but I mean more like a bigger picture, like a European picture. Ooh, something happened, we cannot deliver that product anymore, please do something, do more observations to back up here.
It's Pierre again.
No, very, very briefly, we do have such example, but as we already said many times, I mean, the value chain that goes from observation to information on user is very complex. So for instance, in Copernicus Marine or in Mercator, when we have bad forecasts for wave, for the ocean, I mean, for tracking pollution and so on, that you get a feedback from the user. Then you have to be able to quantify how this observation, which is coming for complex product, either model or even is influenced by the lack on the lack observation and so on. This is why all the activities that we are working on today is making sure that all this ocean prediction center is the same for weather prediction on climate, seasonal to document the dependency on observation. And that's something that needs to be organized also at international level. That's part of the ocean best practices, part also of, that's something that we will work as part of the UN Decade Collaborative Center on Ocean Prediction to make sure that we have standardized way to document this impact on observation and product. But example, yes, we have, but the question from the observation directly not.
Inga, yeah.
Yeah, maybe I complement that from the regional sea point of view. If we are talking about the Baltic Sea, which is an enclosed sea where the stratification is enormously important, it has a several layered stratification, not just one stratification layer. So the parameterization of the models in these kind of or type of seas is really important, because when you are trying to simulate the fluxes, when you are trying to understand the oxygen conditions in different layers, and you do not have enough information how the system is functioning, then you are failing in your product.
And I would love to have an answer from, I think it's you, from the AXA, the insurance sector, because I'm sure that this is a very high interest to you. It's the uncertainties and the way the system works defines the risk and the primes for your clients.
Krista, anything you want to say to that? Use one of these mics, they work.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, you're right. We have to be very careful with the information we provide and how we compute the risk. So information on uncertainties and having better forecast is quite valuable for us. Yes.
Okay, maybe one more question. There is none. Then I would like to address the final statements for this panel, but also for today. George, would you like to start?
We're not going to make a wish as before?
Go for it, yes.
Okay. Because I was preparing my wish, throughout the meeting. So, yeah, what I would like to have is a fully fledged EOS, a fully fledged European Ocean Observing System that would serve the users, provide all this that the users need, and it's sustainable, and it's for the benefit of the society. That's a small wish, with a lot of money behind it.
Nicolas.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm not sure it's such a small wish. For me, my main wish would be to ensure that we have a good cooperation and commitments from the different responsible of the programs for monitoring, for observing, etc. Because this is where I think at the different levels, international, regional, and local, where we have a real problem. The responsibility are too disparate.
You do have your own mic. Pierre-Yves, what are you wishing for?
I would start with the same as George. I mean, a fully fledged EOOS, I mean, consolidated European ocean observing system, but that is fully connected to ocean prediction activity, digital twin ocean, and really making sure that the ocean observing community works hand in hand with the modeling community to really co-design, co-develop what we need for user and applications.
Magdalena?
Can I have 2 wishes?
Oh, 2 wishes, go for it.
One wish is to see, obviously, a fully integrated observation and information system that reaches the applications, fulfilling the needs of society for adaptation. And I would like to, that all the efforts that we put on, some of you on measuring, others on integrating data simulation, forecasting, years of work and money, at least they have a purpose and they are used. So for that we need observations for downscaling, maybe with machine learning, but targeting specific applications. And then when I talked about machine learning, that's the second wish. I have seen very few applications of machine learning in the ocean, and I think it's because of the lack of observations. So one wish, the second wish would be that we have enough observations, including in situ observations, to exploit the potential of machine learning, especially for the coastal regions. I think that could be great.
I also have 2 wishes, but they are interlinked and maybe quite concrete. So my first wish is actually connected with the national level coordination. We have heard quite a lot that we have fragmentation and duplication. So if we start from our homes and if we coordinate better our activities at the national level, we will make the cornerstones for the European Ocean Observing System. And my second wish is actually written in our declaration, in the EuroSea Declaration. The first bullet point there says that we wish the establishment of the European Ocean Observing System office, coordinated office, so that we can really have the top-down coordination also, besides the bottom-up initiative that we have had so far.
Well, there's nothing to add for me, actually, but I say thank you to the last panel. We take a picture again of you because I also know Nicolas has to head to the train. Thank you very much, George, Nicolas, Pierre-Yves, Magdalena, and Inga. Please stand for the picture. And I already take the time to say thank you. And as a journalist, I'd like to address again, never forget to spread the word also out of your bubble. Talk to journalists, talk to citizens, talk to everyone who might be interested in what is necessary to be protected and why. So I think this would be great, because otherwise there won't be decisions, no money, no compromises. And if you're not doing the great work you're doing, there won't be any solutions about this. But there are always people behind the scenes. And this is why I would like to have one thank you addressed to all the technicians working on this panel here today and all the symposium. This is your applause, everyone behind the scenes here. And of course, there's one name you probably read a lot in the emails you got. She organized a lot. Please welcome on stage Dr. Nicole Gössner.
Okay, thanks, Christine, for this short introduction. I also would like to take the opportunity to thank all of you, and I would like to thank the team here at EuroSea UNESCO for helping us setting up this symposium. There was a lot of effort, endurance, and a lot of, I would say, ambition to make this a really successful event. So thank you to everyone here behind the scenes. And I also would like to say thank you to the man who has been steering the EuroSea boat, really, through some high waves and some storms over the last almost 4 years now. So on behalf of the whole EuroSea consortium, of all the work package leaders, the co-leaders, all the more than 80 task leaders in EuroSea and all their teams who have done an amazing work over the last 3.5 years. I would like to thank Torsten Tenur, who has been coordinating the project EuroSea.
Torsten, maybe you come up again once more. We kind of started today together, so let's close this event together. Are you happy with the day?
Yes, I am very happy with the day. I'm not just only happy with the day, I'm very happy with the whole week and the last 4 years of working together with all of you, all of the work package leaders, task leads, and scientists and stakeholders in EuroSea. I think that has been very rewarding. I know the work hasn't stopped yet. We still have some work to do. And I know we have a lot of joint ventures going forward in new opportunities to forward and improve the ocean observing and forecasting systems in Europe.
So let's keep on working. You keep on working. Thank you for that. And have a good last day in Paris, maybe, or a good trip back home. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, so there's one more thing. There was one more thing. Yes, right. This is the EuroSea Declaration. It's going to be hard for you to read it, but if you go on the website, I guess on the website, on EuroSea website, on the news, you all seen a draft of that we sent out in the beginning of the week, I think. And there was a few comments, we have worked that in, and now this is the 2-page EuroSea Declaration that we can take home and refer to in the future. So, thank you very much for that.